All right, we're back with Tyson Lee back to the podcast, his second appearance on the podcast. Tyson, thank you so much for joining me again. The episode that you and I did not too long ago about emotional mastery got a lot of really, really great feedback from my audience, and it got a very significant amount of downloads. So I know it's a topic of interest to people, especially as we're heading into just more uncertainty globally, economically, politically, financially, spiritually. It's like there's so many the rug is being pulled out from a lot of folks, probably in a good way for us to recalibrate, but throughout that process, emotions really surface, and anger can get the best of you. Depression can get the best of you. Anxiety can get the best of you. And so managing that energy, that emotion is paramount. So first and foremost, welcome back to the call, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Peter. It's good to see you
And
again.
yeah, you too, man. And so we're going to kind of pick up where we left off on the last episode and talk about love, and also how to get to that higher frequency, but also how to navigate. If folks are dealing with depression and anxiety, those are the two big ones. But what do you see in your coaching practice that is some of the biggest challenges that people are facing today?
It is remarkable to me how many young people have experienced PTSD. And like the with social media, with the birth of social media, and everyone putting their best foot forward on social media, it creates this image for the younger generation that doesn't understand or know that they have to live up to this standard. And there's always been the keeping up with the Joneses, right? And so no matter how much they do, they always are left feeling like it's not enough. Or there's always that post on social media of somebody that has done it better or bigger. And it's this massive world of comparison. And all of comparison is a belief that's rooted in separation. And separation comes from the ego. And so also a lot of separate thoughts come from fight or flight, right? That's like when you need to protect yourself, be aware from yourself. And so stress hormone has skyrocketed, cortisol in young people, right? Like usually it was like it was awesome to be young and it was so freeing to be young and you had your health. And I'm talking to kids anywhere from like 16 to 25 to 26 and even older than that. I mean, we all struggle with emotions, but they're just crippled. And so when it used to be like, oh yeah, I experience a little bit of social anxiety when I'm asking this girl out, now it's like I don't feel good enough to go out in public. And
Mm.
so I think it's gone from like dysfunction to crippling, right? Like where it's incapacitating, like, and people, like, they'll go out in public and they'll start to have a panic attack or something like this, and most of it's all based around the fear of judgment, what others may think. That stems from unworthiness. And so that is so surprising to me because even, I'm 38, even from 15 years ago, it seems so much more prevalent in this upcoming generation. And I also believe that to be a product of the parents of this generation never being taught this themselves, therefore not
Mhm.
being able to teach their children.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm seeing that too. That what you said, from it being a problem to it being crippling, really resonates. I'm seeing that in relationships in general, but a lot of that is rooted in our emotional maturity and our emotional development and how we're able to process those emotions. Um, would you say that social media is the primary culprit that has really exacerbated this issue, or would you say that there's other things that are causing it?
Well, I think social media is what has been created from what was being created from within us. So I think that's the product of our internal environment. I think if it wasn't for social media, with evolution of consciousness, it would be something else. But I think in the younger generation, I think when you get older, you kind of already have this ideal, but things stay in the collective. And I think we talked about this on the first podcast, emotion is energy in motion. When it doesn't get expressed or handled, or you disassociate from it or suppress it, it becomes a repeat feeling lodged in the body. So I would say in the younger generation, and those coming up who were born into social media and have been raised with the social media culture, that in that genre of people, that yeah, it's probably the number one culprit. Um, and then also the the brain scrambling effect of constant social media scrambling, right? Like, so it's because of social media and the internet that nature has become less important, that exercise has become less important, that all these other factors have become less important, which also exacerbates it, right? Like it
Hmm.
makes it worse, right? So like, and then all the connection is done online and everyone's behind a keyboard and anybody can say whatever they want or express themselves however they want without any real accountability of what's actually going on. And so I think that's furthered us from the truth and created more of an identity of separation with so many people.
You talked about separation and how that's the root of ego. Essentially, it's how we define ego as something separate from something else. What are the primary beliefs and emotions of the ego, and why is identifying these beliefs and emotions first step to connecting back to love, back to the heart?
Yeah, so we did talk about this. Basically, anything that convinces you that you are separate from the whole, right? Separate from money, separate from anything. That is rooted in separation. And typically, most emotions stem from just a group of emotions, but the ones that come from the ego are anger, fear, and sadness. And anger is backed by the belief of attachment, right? So if we're attached to an outcome and it doesn't happen, anger is typically the result. Now, there can be resentment. You can project that out as blame, and there can be resentment towards another for not getting that, right? And there can be a lack of personal responsibility, but really anger and attachment. And then sadness is going to be the belief of lack. So anytime that we're sad, and I'm not saying to bypass, spiritually bypass your emotions, but like if a family member dies, right, or somebody close to you, you are sad, but you're also telling yourself that your life is lacking without this other person, right, which is a direct reflection to what you're not able to fulfill within yourself. So I'm sad because I don't have money. It's lack, right? And anything in lack perpetuates itself to more lack. And then there's the belief of fear, right? And fear, or there's the emotion of fear, and fear is backed by the belief that we must control our experience to be safe, right? And so back with the unworthiness, there's a real lack of safety. Everyone I talk to, one of the first questions I ask people is like, do you feel safe with yourself? And they're like, no, I
Mm.
don't, right? And that is, and so if they did feel safe, there would be another level of authenticity. And then on top of all this, that suppresses authenticity. I'm sure you're a fan and a believer of Gary Brecker's work, 10x Health, but he discovered that frequency was actually a more attractive and more polarizing vibration than love itself. Meaning that, like, to express ourselves authentically is how we actually create all that we desire to create. But we have to remove the beliefs of the ego to be able to be comfortable enough with that authentic expression, right? And so many people are suppressing their authenticity, trying to show up based on these beliefs of the ego is how others would want them to show up so they can get love and acceptance and approval and connection, which is really creating more of the opposite. It's creating more disconnection. It's creating more unauthentic relationships. And like everyone that's watching this video sees some crazy jackass on social media and you're thinking, what the hell? And this has 18 million likes or whatever. That person, whether you agree or disagree, is probably authentically expressing themselves. And if all humans did, like, and for whatever reason, that authentic resonance is polarizing with that. I mean, there's so many people on the planet, right? Somebody's going to resonate, but it attracts those people. And so, from a manifestation and law of attraction standpoint, you are doing yourself such a disservice by operating inauthentically due to all these beliefs of the ego that you are separate. If you believe that you are connected to part of everything, the liver doesn't say, well, I wish I was the heart today. The liver's like, I'm happy being the liver and helping the whole body function. I know that without being the liver, that the heart wouldn't even exist. The heart wouldn't, be able to function. And that's how we kind of that's the belief in unity. And that's kind of an example or a metaphor in how I view it. It's like so many people are unhappy with their place in the world, but they're unhappy with their place in the world because they've been stuck in separation and suppressing authenticity. And if they were just for a short period of time able to step into that authentic self, they would really begin to attract and create so much more of what they desire in life.
Hmm. You were talking about feeling safe with yourself. What that was one of the first questions that you asked people is, do they feel safe with themselves? How does one gauge that? How do they know if they feel safe with themselves or not?
So there's a great extra. So look, give me a moment. So I think at first it comes with some emotional awareness, right? Like actually understanding what you are feeling. We went over the four pillars of integrity, understanding what it is that you're feeling. A lot of fear, a lot of unworthiness comes from not feeling safe, right? Which is the opposite of, hey, I need to do this. And so without dissecting it on a mental level, do you feel safe or not? Right? Like, and I mean, most people are taught what safety is, but safety is a comfort, right? Is an emotion. And so you could look at somebody that says, well, I don't feel comfortable with myself. In the same terms, that's somebody saying, I don't feel safe with myself,
Hmm.
right? Like, and so safety is comfort in a lot of ways.
It makes me think of the shadow, and how
Mm,
people push certain things into the shadow because they don't feel safe to expose that part of themselves. And it's so the part of the reason why I asked you that question is to how do you gauge that is because a lot of this stuff operates subconsciously. It's so subtle. If you're, that's why you said awareness is key because if you're not aware that when you show up at the dinner party, you're extra smiling and you're more outgoing and you're putting on a whole front to this is who I really am when deep on the
yeah.
inside you're going, God, I'd rather just be
Hmm.
home, eating chicken nuggets or something. It's like,
Yeah, well,
there. Yeah, go ahead.
yep. And I have an exercise. So this was something that I did with men. It's a journaling exercise that anyone can do. And it's great. So I talk a lot about wonder, right? When you ask a question to yourself, you're not trying to answer it, you're waiting for the answer to come in. And so that's another conversation on another day. But I would have, well, a lot of times women, like in relationships, their core desire is to feel safe. If you are a man that can walk into a room and make other women feel safe, you will attract a lot of women. It's just, and I know this personally because I used to be so rah, so egotistical, right? And I got this feedback all the time, like, I just don't really feel safe. And I'm like, weird, right? Like it was foreign to me at the time, but digging into this over the years. And so you can do a journal exercise that like what is it that makes me feel safe around another individual and what is it that makes me feel safe with myself, right?
Hmm.
So for years, like I struggle with addiction. We talked about that last time, right? Like I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe with money. I didn't trust myself with so many different things. And the other thing is, and men and women can do this, right? But because women, the feminine's core desire is to feel safe, if you are a man and you want to really get some very honest feedback, start asking women when you walk into the room, do you feel safe with me here?
Mm,
Or what are the top three things that I can do to make you feel safe?
mm.
And you will get so much information and so much, it's so beautiful. And so for about a year, I started doing this. Like, I would walk in and I'd kind of sense room and I'd be like, oh, this kind of person feels anxious. And in my ego, I'm like, yeah, that's just because I'm a badass, and, whatever, or they're intimidated or they have issues or whatever. But when I really started to dig into this, it was incredibly valuable to walk in
Mm.
to a room and ask women, do you feel safe around me? What are the things that you need to see in a man to feel safe? Or what are the things that I am doing to make you feel unsafe?
Dude, that's a fascinating exercise. So, and you said you did this for a
Well,
while. What can
mhm.
you give me? Give me a story. Like, what would you do when you go up to them? These are people, complete strangers. Just walk right up to them.
Well, not always complete strangers.
Okay.
I would walk into the girl I was dating in her family's house or something, right? Or, I'd walk in to an event and I have absolutely asked complete strangers, but a lot of times, like if you don't know the person, a complete stranger will be like, why wouldn't I feel safe if you're not here? They won't even open up enough, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
typically is more effective if you can do it with somebody that you have a relationship that is at least going to give you the honest feedback, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the one thing you don't want is not honest feedback. But one was just my energy. They were just like, you're always so intense, like you're
Mm.
always so focused, and because of all the energy it took to do that, women were like, yeah, I just wish you could be more, right? Like you've always got to do something, and that, in a partnership, for instance, it's like that created a feeling that she wasn't good enough for me because I was so motivated, so driven, right? And so if you're that driven, like, what are you doing with me? Right. And it comes back to her self-worth. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about her. It was about me wanting to make her feel safe, right? And it was like, can you just be with me without doing anything? And so the intensity, right? And so I realized that even when I tried to calm myself, it was in my energy field. So that's years of breath work, meditation, heart centered consciousness, different focuses where, and this is so great. So I had a woman come stay with me about 4 months ago, and she's actually a woman I paid several $1,000s for coaching. I refer a ton of people to her. She is, in my opinion, the best Akashic record reader ever. And
Mm.
she is one of the most intuitive women ever. And she's also one of the most feminine women ever. And she's almost 60. And she does a lot of body work, and I just respect her so much. And she has known me for about 6 years, and she came and stayed with me. She goes, energetically, you don't even feel like the same person. She
Mm.
goes, I have never seen anybody go from that type of masculine intensity to just being so calm, so balanced, so at peace. And so that was huge, right? And so that was kind of like, I had to pat myself on the back because it did. It took a lot of work. So that could, and then obviously, like if you walk in and you're covered in anxiety and somebody's an empath, they're immediately going to feel anxiety, and anxiety is rooted in fear and a lack of safety. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of it, really, when I boiled it down, I was like, if I can create safety within myself, if I can operate without stress and anxiety and fear, my presence alone is going to create high levels of safety in those around.
Fascinating. So, all right, let's dig into this a little bit because I think that there is a potential fundamental flaw in this, in that if you're going to women and asking them if they feel safe, first of all, like I said earlier, I think that's a beautiful exercise, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to take that on. I think there needs to be added something to this though, because there are women who have experienced PTSD who don't feel safe amongst safe people. The
Yep.
anxiety is off the charts, and this is not a insult at all. This is just a honest reporting,
Fact.
constructive
Yep.
feedback that there are some people, men and women, this isn't just women, that feel, I'll just give an example to make it more masculine. Some guys I know that have come back from war, they and have literal PTSD, and I'm sitting there having coffee with them, and a dump truck goes by, and they flinch and look, they don't feel safe. Their nervous system is
Yeah.
constantly registering fight or flight. Um,
Yep.
so if you're calibrating yourself to what other people are saying, here's the question: how do you know when you go to ask them if they feel safe or not, if that's something that you want to calibrate into? And I'll just say this really quickly. I see men sometimes try to fit within the model of what a woman says she feels safe within, and it's basically them handing over their balls. I will be completely impotent in order for you to feel you can steamroll me, you could do anything to me. What's your thought on that?
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And so here's the thing, like, if you go ask 100 random people for feedback, like, you take it all with a grain of salt. At the end of the day, you need to feel into what's true to you and what's not. And recently, I've come to the terms that the truth is the sum of all perspectives. So everyone has their own truth and everything like that, but you need to figure out what resonates for you. Now, typically, if you're going to be doing this exercise and something is accurate, like, it's kind of like your intuition or synchronicities, right? If somebody tells you to read a book three times in a week, three different people in a week, you're like, okay, that's for me, right? Like you'll get those constant signs from the universe. So if you are getting consistent feedback, right, and you probably want to be selective about those who you ask. I wouldn't go in and ask my traumatized aunts, um, and now if I truly had a desire to make them feel safe, absolutely, because every perspective can be valuable. And so I wouldn't take responsibility for this, but asking women like that could give you a deeper understanding of what it is that would make them feel safe. And if
Hmm.
you are around somebody like that and you want to take full responsibility and help them feel safe. But again, you would ask a variety of people that you're close with or or women that you spend time with. And it's also the feedback. What are three things that a man can do or a person can do? You can ask a man, what are three things that I can do or a person can do to make you feel safe and secure with me?
Hmm. Something that came to mind when you were saying all that is, if a 6-year-old little girl came to you and said, "I don't feel safe," how would you, as a grown man, respond to that? And uh, the mental image of, being not impotent, but being very, very gentle and communicating a very softer energy might be necessary. And the reason why I share that is because a lot of times people experience these traumas when they are young. At least in my anecdotal experience, of the women that I have come across that have demonstrated some level of PTSD in my own analysis, I often have had childhood traumas, and so when they feel unsafe,
Mm,
the child energy in them exposes herself. And so on the one hand, yes, we don't want to be impotent and steamrolled by nasty energy that's hostile and fearful. On the other hand, to meet it with some level of gentleness and uh, presence, I think, is also required.
So I will first state that I am not a parent. I have worked with dozens and dozens of parents over the years to better their relationships with kids. I've read a ton of parenting books, but as you're relating it, it's more like the inner child. And
Hmm.
at first it's a conversation. You ask, the quality of your relationships and your life is defined by the quality. So it's like, what's wrong, honey? And then it's just getting them to express what is going on. And then instead of judging it or disagreeing, you don't have to agree with it. You honor it. If you really care about that person's safety, regardless of what it is, you honor it as a strong masculine man. But I think there's conversation, especially in a 6-year old. It's like, I notice I don't feel safe right now, or I'm scared of that man, right? And then the parents like, well, let's go talk to the man, right? Maybe it's they're afraid of what's unfamiliar, right? They're comfortable with what's comfortable. And so even when you're a child, you can feel unsafe with any stranger, no matter what their energy is, right? And so in any exercise like this, it's all just feedback and it's about that conversation. And so if it was a child, I would say, what is wrong? Is there anything that I'm doing that is frightening you or making you feel unsafe? Is there anything I can do different? What would make you feel safe? Right? What would make you feel safe? And they could say, take me back to my mom. Cool, awesome. And you just get to be okay with that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And you have to realize that typically, again, and this is so imperative because some people take things so personally. One person will say something to them and they will attach onto that idea of themselves forever. If so, I had to hear it from dozens of sources that women felt unsafe around me before I actually bought in it. Because forever I'm like, yeah, that's just you. That's just you. That's just
Hmm.
you. Right. And so the feedback will be consistent, through asking. And I would, it's almost like a data chart, right? Like, if you ask 100 people and two people say that, you may be able to throw that one away. But if 60 or 70% of people all say the same thing based on your behavior, and it's probably something you're not even aware of. It was
Hmm.
something I wasn't aware of, right? There is no right wrong in this. And I think, and you're the questioner, but I think this segues perfect into the deeper understanding and truth that I'm so passionate about teaching, and that is connecting to source and being able to actually filter truth and untruth throughout your body. Because I truly believe when somebody is connected to the divine, connected to source, their footsteps are guided by the divine, right? And we have this truth filter of expansion and contraction, and we can pick up a piece of fruit, or we can hear somebody speak, and we can feel our body contract or expand, and we have that internal guidance system. There is no need for a coach like me.
Mhm.
And I always tell people that work with me long term, my goal is to teach you how to self coach. I think
Mhm.
if you need a coach for longer than 3 years, your coach isn't teaching you the right stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because it's ultimately that self coach, and that I'm putting that on top of that through that filtering process. Because if you take all the weight in the world from anything that anybody says, you're going to be a hot mess. You've got to take that feedback and run it through your system, Peter. And
Mhm.
you decide at the end of the day what's true and not true for you.
Mhm. Um, I have like three different questions that would take us into three different tangents, but let me try to stay on point here with what you
I'm
said
good to
about.
go wherever, you know.
Well, I feel like these would turn into separate podcasts. My passion is in relationships, and I kind of want to get your take on how these dynamics play within the masculine feminine dynamic specifically, because I feel like that's a chronic issue in Western culture right now. However, to look at it through the humanity lens, that we're all wanting to connect back to source, I'm curious, and this is maybe more my active question to you now, how to do that. How do you bring it back to heart center if somebody's dealing with anxiety, if they're dealing with, childhood trauma, that's still rearing its ugly head, if they're dealing with financial anxiety and concerns, the dollars, continuing to debase and inflate, and people are struggling to put food on the table. What what can someone do to reconnect back to that heart space, back to source,
Are you talking specifically in relationships or as individuals?
as individuals?
Okay. Heart math is one of my favorite things, right? So you're weeding out all these beliefs of separation in the ego. And then it gets to a point where you have cleared enough where you are connected back to the divine. Really, when you are operating from Christ consciousness, same thing as heart-based consciousness, you are connected with the divine, right? And in that space, like, have love is a felt experience. I'm not going to try to explain it with words because I was taught about what love was for years and years, Peter. And when I actually experienced it for the first time, there was no amount of explanation that anybody had ever given me that could even come close to that. So when you are full, and we'll all go into the how to here in a minute, but when you are
Yeah.
full or satiated, right? Like there is no room for anxiety, fear, or worry, right? You can't experience love and stress at the same time, right? You can't experience anxiety and love at the same time. And so you have had experiences in your life where you have been connected to that love where it is so overwhelming, there are tears pouring out your eyes. You are so satiated, you don't feel like you have a need for anything. And obviously, we're all human beings. Nobody walks around, unless you're a monk in Tibet, 24/7 feeling this. But connecting to this on a daily basis gives you a reminder of what's true. So many times the anxiety and going back into the ego is buying back into a story that is rooted in illusion. It's buying into a falsehood. And we're programmed with so many falsehoods that if we're not taking the time daily to connect to the heart, to connect to source, to connect to the divine, to feel that love, to feel that safety, to feel that satiation, we are going to buy into what our experience is telling us, right?
Mhm.
And so the power of that is so fascinating. And so if you are somebody that has PTSD and high levels of emotion, it could take you 6 to 12 months of work to really get into a space where you could experience this every single day, right? You may have glimpses of it. When I teach this to somebody, and it depends on the emotional state that they're in when they hire me, but let's say somebody, you know, I've seen anywhere from 3 to 6 months, right? And as early actually as 6 weeks of somebody like really committing to this work and doing it on a daily basis. Like working with this young kid who was struggling with addiction and had like 4 DUIs in 6 months. And his parents came to me or his mother came to me and he was just really, really struggling. He was like, I'm ready, dude. Whatever you say, whatever, And
Right.
7 weeks into our coaching, he goes, I was outside doing landscaping work and all of a sudden I just started breaking into tears of joy. So that was 7 weeks after
Mm.
ruthlessly committing to this. So I don't want people to think that it's unobtainable or anything like this. And the more that we have the felt experience, the more we can. Like we were talking about before the podcast, I would say we'll just go top three. What are the top three ways that you can get back into the heart? We've already talked about one, and so I'll add another three, but identifying what's in the way, which is the ego, the beliefs of separation, and dissecting that from a mental or a masculine space. There's two aspects of healing and spiritual work, masculine and feminine. The feminine is represented by the body, the masculine is represented by the mind. If we do a bunch of body work, breath work, heart math, meditation, but we don't actually do the work to shift our thoughts, we're just keeping the faucet. It's like draining the sink without turning off the faucet. We're in this perpetual cycle of healing back to the ego, back to the heart, back to the ego, back to the heart. So if you're not using the felt experience to rework beliefs and thoughts and things like that, you're going to be in a perpetual cycle. You have to use these moments of truth and this satiation to rewrite the associations in your brain, to rework the thoughts and beliefs. Heart math is my favorite. And I'm just going to go through it really quick. And out of all the people, with all the people I'm working with right now, this is by far the most effective and favorite exercise of anybody. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is rest and digest, which is the opposite of the fight or flight system or the cortisol stress system, right? And so we're either in this fight or flight where we're feeling stress, or we're either activating the parasympathetic nervous system and we're rest and digest, right? And so in that rest and digest state, that's where people feel safe. And this 3 minute exercise can do it. So it's three parts, very, very simple. First part is, and if you want some spatial awareness, you put your hand on your heart. I always do my left hand, and you can either do your actual heart or you can do your heart center, your chakra. I found benefit in both. I would say listen to your gut and do what you want. And then you inhale. To start, work on a cadence, counting, right? And the inhale for 4 to 5 seconds, and then the exhale must be longer. So that is the first part is breathing through, meaning that visualize your heart space and visualize the in breath coming in the heart, visualize the out breath going out of the heart. Some people like to breathe strictly through the nose. You can also, I find it more effective to go in through the nose and out through the mouth. So let's say you're in for a count of 4. You need to be out for a count of 6 to 8. It doesn't have to be half. It just has to be a longer exhale than the inhale is. So if you went 4-6, you could do 6-8, whatever it is. That's and you so you find your cadence and you do that for a moment or two. When you will feel your body start to release tension, you will feel that rest and digest system come on. You will start to feel more safety, more peace, no racing thoughts, right? So you've got that area of focus, you've got the cadence. And then the third part is experiencing one of three emotions: compassion for self or others, love for self or others, or gratitude for any one thing. If I'm meditating or feeling a lack of self-worth, or am feeling guilty or something about what I do, I focus on compassion for self. If I'm triggered about somebody else, I focus on compassion for them, trying to understand their perspective or love for them, right? And it's been scientifically shown to take 3 minutes for this to actually start to change your DNA and your biology
Mm.
and change all the hormones and the chemical makeup of your brain and in your body. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, why it's so effective is because somebody can activate it in 3 minutes. I like to do it for 5 to 7 minutes, but you don't have to take 15 to 20 minutes to meditate throughout the day. This is a form of meditation, and you can do this whenever you're triggered. Like if an emotion comes up and you get triggered to something and that thought keeps repeating for the next couple minutes, the awareness of catching that and doing the heart math. I have a friend, a close friend, who is a high level business guy, and he struggles badly with Xanax because he has so much anxiety. And he told me that this one exercise has cut his Xanax intake in by 75%. And
Wow.
he is like, with this exercise, I feel like I can get off of my Xanax. And
Mm,
so, but after, you have to unwind the energy. So if you go through 20 years of life feeling fear, anxiety, all of this, it takes a little bit, but what you're actually doing is you're reprogramming your brain and body to not be affected by this outside stimuli. And you stay consistent with this. You do this 5 to 6, even a dozen times a day. If you were to do it for 3 minutes, 10 times a day, that's still only 30 minutes. Nobody watching this doesn't at least be on their phone randomly doing nothing for at least 30 minutes a day. So anybody can do this 10 times throughout the day. And, this is what I was doing right before I got on the podcast. This is what I do to connect to the divine. I do this exercise so often. If I'm just sitting there with nothing to do, my first sense now is go down to the heart math and do that. If your nervous system is really, really jacked up, do deep, intensive breath work. And I'm not talking about 15 to 20 minutes of breath work. I'm talking about an hour 45 minutes to an hour of breath work, deep breathing, breath retentions, exhale. Um, I'll just go ahead and shout him out. I don't know him personally. The best breathwork channel that I have found on YouTube is Breathwork with Sandy. This guy is incredible. He is so heart centered. I'll find a link to his channel and you can put it on the podcast show notes. This guy is incredible and he has helped me so much. And he comes out with a new video every week and has been running a channel for 3 years. The guy has hundreds of different breathwork sessions and
mm,
all of them are so good. It's even got like the breath that goes up and back. I
mm,
mean, so they're so easy to follow.
mm.
And deep breath work if you are really, really um, struggling with emotions. And then also a huge fan of long form meditation. Like every week, I want to meditate for 45 minutes to an hour at least once. And that gives me what I call like the full hard drive reset, right? Like I come out of that meditation and anything that I was carrying has been expelled. It is like no longer in my body. I can feel it. Um, and so yeah, that's a long answer, but these are the most effective methods. Also, people find, and this is so common, maybe not to everyone, but in for 4, hold for 7. I think it's out for 8. That can be super effective, box breathing, but the heart math is my favorite.
Uh, I love that. Just to make sure that I understand the three things that you mentioned, you talked about the breath work, the focus on compassion, love, and gratitude. I think that was the third thing. What was the
So
second thing?
yeah, so number one is focusing on your heart center
Okay.
or your actual heart space. That's number one. Number two is breathing out for a longer count than you're breathing in. After you have done that and found your cadence, for the more you do it, the quicker you'll get there. The quicker you'll notice all that stress release. But at first, I would probably do that for 2 to 3 minutes. Like really get your cadence in there where you don't even have to count. You can just feel it. Once you start to feel that stress release, then go to the emotion, right? Because if you're focused on the emotion, you're not focused on the heart space. And honestly, what I do as a combination for all of that is I try to hold the emotion in my heart space.
Mm,
Or if I'm giving compassion to another, I try to hold the face of that individual in my heart space.
mm. Uh, that's so powerful. I think of the body as like a conduit of energy, and we tend to sometimes get energy stuck. I think we might have talked about on the last podcast about the book called The Body Keeps the Score. I actually haven't even gone through that fully, but I've gotten a summary of it, and the idea that the body is keeping track of your trauma, of your wins and your losses, so to speak, and that energy can be actually trapped in your body. And you were talking about doing like a hard drive reset. The breath work seems to be so powerful to recalibrate the nervous system to its baseline homeostasis that you've received it in, that allows you to move this energy. Um,
Mhm.
what do you say to somebody who's dealt with such trauma, that they are in an unhealthy nervous system, and that the breath work? Have you? Let me ask you this: have you seen breath work uh, recalibrate or essentially heal somebody who's dealt with trauma, legit?
Yes,
physical, sexual, abusive type trauma.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, but so if you experience trauma, let's say 10 years ago, and you've been carrying around that trauma with you, it's going to take longer to unravel the energy. And so really the way to, but yes, so I used to think panic attacks were a joke, Peter. Like not a joke. I wouldn't make fun of people or anything like that, but I for the life of me can't couldn't understand how are you panicking and afraid of something that's not even there. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, I've never experienced it. I don't get it. And then and I don't think I shared this with you, but before I took my time off, I had a serious, massive life crisis event that created massive PTSD. I didn't leave the house for 3 months. I was crying like every day. I was breaking down. I went straight, almost suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge wake up, and I was like literally having 2 or 3 panic attacks a day. And thankfully, in hindsight, I understand why I went through that now. I'm so much more well equipped to help others by going through that. But I went through that. And when it happens, yes, it's very difficult to get yourself to sit down and do a lot of breath work. So everything takes a little bit of time too. But if you are removed from that initial trauma, yes, absolutely, the deeper breath work. But it's like the deeper the trauma and the longer you've held on to it, the more work and consistency it's going to take. So think about this. The trauma has created, and this may be valuable. What trauma actually is in the brain, like how it works, is it is a defense mechanism that the brain creates to avoid that same situation from happening on a
Mm-hmm.
scientific level. So like if you are 4 years old and you're walking downtown with your parents, and all of a sudden you look over and you see somebody walking across a crosswalk, and boom, they get smashed by a car. And as a 4 or 5 year old, this is traumatic to you, right? And you kind of recover from that. Let's say your parents buy a farmhouse out in the country and you spend the next 15 years of your life into the country. And then you decide to get a job in the city when you're 25. And on the first day of your job, you're walking to your work, right? And you're just measly walking to the work, and you glance over and you see somebody going across the crosswalk. And all of a sudden your heart starts to race. You start to feel anxiety, panic, and you don't even know what is going on. That is a defense mechanism, a wiring in your brain that you have created as a defense mechanism or a safety mechanism to not experience that again. So to understand what trauma actually is in the brain, right? The science of it is like your brain is trying to help you avoid a situation that was very traumatic to you. But just because, and that's so important to speak about too, because like I have dated women who are in abusive relationships, and it is in the past, and it is so tough because let's say we'll be having an argument and I get very passionate, or we're not even having an argument, and all of a sudden I raise my voice, and that was the mechanism that triggered them, and all of a sudden they're like, "Why are you yelling at me?" And I'm like, "Yelling at you? Like I just speak loud, like and it's like, whoa, you want to honor that, once you've learned that that's how somebody operates, but that's how it works. And so the trauma in so many ways is keeping you stuck and in the same energy, in the same experience, in the same frequency of attracting more of the same. So it must be dealt and addressed with. And I am a firm believer, and I don't want to negate or minimize anybody's situation, that we can heal ourselves from anything. And we don't need to go into it, but I've got a hell of a story. Like I tell people that, and they're like, how are you where you're at now? Right. And it's like, but lots of consistency, lots of effort.
Are you willing to share some of that? Is this the right time, or do you want
Yeah.
to? Okay, I'd love to hear it if you're
We
open
talk
to it.
about it, so like early on, before I was 10 years old, I was either 8 or 9. I watched my father come home drunk, abuse my mother, and then in front of his 3 children, stick a gun in his mouth and threaten to blow his head off. And
Mm,
this is like my hero. This is my father, right?
mm-hmm.
So, I take off, like I just flip. I go just boom, and I out the back door, flying through the back door, right? Jumped a fence, ran until I couldn't run anymore. I hid behind a blue dumpster, one of those big trash cans. And I sat there for 4 hours until the police came and found me because my mother had called and said that I had ran away or I was lost. It was so traumatizing to me. And I remember as a child sitting there, all I could think about was, what have I done wrong? Am I that bad of a son? Because as children, we take all this on ourselves that my father wouldn't even want to live. I must be a horrible fucking son. And right there creates this deep trauma of self-worth and insecurities and different things like that. And so until I recognized this, identified this, and cleared this, it became a constant theme in my life that if I wasn't like, I basically took everything on as my own, right? And it was all related to my self worth. This person, and that's all in separation. There's only me, right? This person's doing this because I'm unworthy. And then I could not handle rejection or anything forever, And then it goes on where, like, I was so insecure when I was younger because I was so small around dating in high school and stuff. And I always had this crush on this girl. And I finally get the courage to ask her out. And she was like, oh, she's like, no, like, I'm not interested, blah, blah, blah. So fast forward. So I took that on as, what's wrong with me? Same belief that, happened from that trauma. What's wrong with me? Why am I not good enough? Why can't I have what I want? Why can't I feel safe? Why can't I feel loved? Why can't I experience connection? There must be something wrong with me.
Hmm.
And this was a very healing moment. So 6 years later, and I was in a relationship at the time, I go back to my hometown. I'm visiting some family, and I walk into the local Walmart and I see this woman. And she feels the need to come up and talk to me. And she was like, hey, you remember like 5, 6 years ago when you asked me out? I said, yeah. And she said, I am so sorry. She's like, I've always had a crush on you, but I was so insecure about my own shit. I felt I was such in a bad place that I thought there's no way that I could keep this guy. And so I told you no to avoid the pain of possibly being hurt by you. So I
Mm.
had taken it on as my shit. She had taken it on as her shit, right? And then come to find out, and that was just a big aha moment for me. That was
Hmm.
a huge breakthrough because I'm like, for 6 years I've been telling myself this story, and so then like if I would go hit on a girl, like immediately after this, if I would go hit on a girl and get rejected, I'm like, well, I don't really know what's going on. Maybe she's gay, maybe no, seriously,
Yeah. Right.
like maybe she feels insecure about herself. Like, but every time that I would experience rejection, I would immediately take it on myself. And as a conscious child, nobody really came and talked to me and they were like, yeah, your dad's messed up in the head. Like your dad's struggling with this, he's struggling with that. This has nothing to do with you and everything to do with him. But nobody came and explained that to me.
Mm.
Right. So I just carried these beliefs. So, that's again a long answer, but I hope that that makes sense. And that's one of many things that I have experienced, early on.
Yeah, it does. It helps. Thank you for sharing that. It's those kind of real world experiences and that people share, and then you can connect the dots and how to process similar things in our own lives. When you mentioned that concept of um, that epiphany of, oh, she was dealing with her stuff, I took it on as my stuff. I had a similar experience too, where my new sort of default is like what you were saying, is when you don't know, why do we always default to the negative? Why do we always default to, oh, something's wrong with me? Oh, I must not be good enough. Why don't we default just as much to like maybe those things are true. Like maybe the girl, thinks you're a loser
Yeah,
or whatever. But why don't we equal it out by thinking like, well, maybe she's gay or maybe she's, not sure
because
if
it
she can
hits
live
it,
into it.
yeah, it hits our core wounds, which once we gain the core wound is now centered around our perspective of life and our belief system. Our belief system is what helps us keep sense of reality. And so when belief systems are shattered, people will maybe up level eventually, but at first they're like shattered. They're like, whoa. Like it would be like, I always explain this. Like, imagine if you woke up tomorrow and the sky was on the ground and the ground was on the sky. It would freak you out. It would freak you out and you would be like, whoa, because everything that we tell ourselves is how we define reality. And it's what makes us, even if we don't feel comfortable and safe, it's what we think helps us feel some comfortable and safe. So even if somebody doesn't like to be attached to the idea that I'm not worthy, that's why this person rejected me, like that is what they have bought into, and that is
Mhm.
how they make sense of reality and everything that happens to them. Because if they were fully worthy and fully capable of everything else, how could they justify the situation they're in life? It actually justifies to them how things have panned out the way that it is. And so people think, when people ask me, when we're changing belief systems, they're like, well, what should I believe? I'm like, well, what do you want to believe? What
Mhm.
supports you? Like I used to, back in the day, I used to be like, well, you should believe this, this, and this. But now I understand the truth of some. I'm like, what? You should believe something that supports the reality in the life that you want, and give zero F's to anybody else or anybody else's opinion. What is it that you want to create for yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? How do you want to feel about yourself? Believe things that are in alignment with those.
I used to, when I first started to learn this, that seemed so implausible. And so, like, that can't work. You can't just believe what you want to believe because you want to believe it, because you,
Mm-hmm.
it seems arbitrary. It seems like, oh, I'm just pulling these things. But when you do the work, like you were just sharing with your own example, you realize the beliefs that you had before were just as arbitrary. You could have taken the belief when you got rejected, like you said later in life, that, oh, maybe I'm too intimidating. Maybe I'm, maybe they're insecure around me. But you could have had a positive leaning, self elevating sense of self in your beliefs. The beliefs just happened to be on the negative side, but they were just as arbitrary. So when you go to do the work and you pop those barnacles off of shitty beliefs, and you realize, what do I want to manifest? Believe. So let's give an example of what that might look like, just to give it more tangibility for somebody that's listening, and that it's not just, well, I believe I'm the richest person in the world, like not something stupid like that, but what type of beliefs do people take on? Maybe you have some examples from previous clients that helped manifest that more in their life. One is coming to my mind, if you want to think about that a second.
Yeah, go ahead and share.
I just heard somebody talking about their children and how often parents will go, of their teenage children. How often you'll hear parents go like, "Oh, like they know everything, or they combat against everything, or they're addicted to social media." It's like you're constantly reinforcing that. And this parent said, even though there's evidence of that, what I always say is, my child is so open. My child is so willing to shift, if they need to. My child is so willing to hear me out. My child is mature. My child. It's like you're reinforcing that which you seek, and these children move into that. They become that open-minded, mature, conscientious. Sure, they're still in a phase of life, and we have to respect that, but I've seen that with my own kids. I've got two teenagers. They're incredibly emotionally intelligent. We have some of the most amazing conversations. I wish they would record it, because I'm like, I can't believe a 16-year-old is telling me this, right now. And oftentimes they'll check me, and I have to have the humility to hear it. But a lot of that is because I constantly reinforce with them, like, you are intelligent, you are emotionally aware. I love how you stayed calm, even though I know you were totally frustrated. You had every right to be
You've got
really
it.
frustrated, but you kept an even keel. And it's like, I'm just pointing the guardrails, like that's where you want to continue to keep going, and they show up in that way. They're very capable of it.
So what's coming through is, because I think everyone can relate to this. You grow up and your parents want to protect you, right? They want to keep you safe. Don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to people you don't know. Never accept candy from men in vans, whatever it may be, right?
Mhm.
Like this, and this. So you are growing up with the belief system that you are unsafe, that the world is dangerous, that you are unprotected, and that creates a lot of these low vibration emotions. I can't remember the name of it, but there is the largest indigenous tribe in the world. It's in Mexico, and it's 100,000 people. They have a very unique, even the way that we bring children into this world in the American country is traumatizing. Imagine going from a dark womb for 8, 9 months, like, and then seeing the hospital lights. So real quick, the tribe has the most emotionally intelligent group of people. I think the divorce rate is 0.001% per year. By the time the children are 16, they are married, have their own homes. They are so emotionally mature. And a
Hmm.
lot of that, and so with specific beliefs, I think this metaphor will give you the answer that you're looking for based on how we are typically raised here in the States. And so the woman's pregnant and she's about to give birth. They put her in a mud hut. They put her in this mud hut. She gives birth. She gives birth to the child inside the mud hut. They wrap the child in the loincloth. They don't cut off the umbilical cord. It naturally falls off. But basically, over the next 3 to 5 days, they start picking at that mud hut and just slowly allowing the light to seep in, right?
Mm.
So
Wow.
very comforting. So we're immediately traumatized, like through the birthing experience, like if you want to get deep into it. I've traced it all the way back. And then once the mud hut is open, they take a loincloth and they wrap that child around the mother where it can feed. And the child stays there for a year and a half, right? And now, not in the same loincloth. I'm sure it's changed out and, cleanliness and all that, but that's where the child stays. And I think it may not be a year and a half to a couple, it's about a year to a year and a half, right? Then once the child gets into what we call the terrible twos, right? And so even with our languaging
Hmm.
there, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, terrible twos, that's when we have to watch them. This tribe, completely different. That's called the exploratory phase of childhood. And this is where people want to go explore, be dangerous, test their limits, right? And so you have these parents super, super worried about it. Well, in this tribe, so let's say they're all by the fire and the child just like, yep, I'm out. Boom, 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 boom. They don't say anything to it. They don't say, don't go into the forest, don't do anything. Because the child's natural instinct will be to come back to the familia, right? To come
Hmm.
back to the parents. And what happens is they'll go about 10 feet, right? They'll look back. Mom and dad are just chilling, no big deal. They'll go another 10 feet. Now they'll be out at the edge of the forest and they'll come back and parents aren't saying anything. And then all of a sudden they'll come back to their parents. And they allow them, and obviously good parenting, right? If your child's going to walk off a cliff or something like that, yes, there are a time, but we get so over excessive about it, which builds the beliefs like, don't do this, don't do that, building up this paradigm of fear, telling us that we have things to fear. And this is why the children grow up so emotionally intelligent. And when they do get divorced, it's kind of like, yeah, this isn't working. Cool. Hey, can I support you? Can I help anything with your new part? It's just so incredibly, and they are the most
Hmm.
emotionally intelligent tribe ever. And so this is an example, right, of like parenting and beliefs and stories. And then we become our own parents and the stories we tell us define our reality. And so just by and every person that I work with that has parents, I always ask permission, but I'm like, can I please, like, I'll be on the phone with them and I'll hear them with their kids. And I'm just like, no,
Yeah, I know.
no,
It's hard.
no. And I'm like, can I please give you some feedback about how to communicate to your kids in a more positive way that won't completely limit, and create all of these beliefs that will carry on for years and years. So that's the long answer, but it's a great story to depict how that kind of works.
I was at the grocery store the other day, and this woman with her, I don't know, 3 year old, a young woman, maybe not even the mother, but I'm pretty sure it was the mother and her like 3 year old, and the 3 year old was acting up, and she's like, "Oh my God, you have such an attitude," and I was like, "Yeah, I wonder why." It's just these things are very obvious when you're looking from the outside in, and when you're in it, sometimes you're just exhausted. And I get it. I've not been perfect by any stretch, but it's funny sometimes looking on the
Hard to
outside.
read the label from the inside of the jar.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, this work is so paramount and so important because we are experiencing that which we collectively focus on. And we started this conversation with feeling anxiety. The world is uncertain. What if we all started to have more anchoring in the belief that things are going to be all right? And maybe this is a good thing. Maybe certain things need to shed away in order to reveal the brilliance underneath. That's where I'm at emotionally. I went through a period of like, oh shit, this is gonna be bad to like, yeah, it might be rough. Yeah, it might be very rough, but dude, it's gonna be fucking worth it. What I can emotionally intuit into the future is gonna be brilliant.
I think we're moving into the age of abundance. And Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. There's nothing more that you can do for the world than to change your own reality and your own environment, and that will help the collective more than you have ever known. It took me a long time to buy into that fact, but it is so, so true. And I do believe the same thing that we are moving into this and these catalysts like COVID, things like this. But the way our internal belief system creates our external reality is like taxation without representation, like the suppression of the government. Like people want to get angry at the government. And it was like, dude, you started suppressing yourself first. Like these are the systems that were created in the collective because people started to suppress themselves, right? And
Mm,
started to live in their own bondage and own chains. And from that came a system where we become suppressed. And that's another politically, like there's so much going on in the political arena, and just shout out like all the love in the world to everybody dealing with that and that cares about that. And like, there's nothing that we can do other than come together and spread more love. And if you have a different opinion than somebody politically, try to you don't have to agree with it, but try to understand their perspective. Because if you did understand their perspective, you may have a better idea of why they're choosing a certain candidate or whatever. And just that simple allowance of understanding is going to help the healing process. But this division, and it's got to go. And it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And like these are great things that we can do. Like understanding somebody else is one of the fastest ways that you can bring healing to them and yourself. You
hmm
do not have to agree, just understand and accept.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the liver and the heart being parts of the whole. I think of us all as parts of a whole, and I know that people that see things differently than me are reporting from their honest intent. I don't see, you know, intentional uh, maleficence or anything like that. They're reporting
Yeah.
from their honest intent, and so I have to honor that, even though I can't necessarily relate to it or agree to it. um, I know that there is truth in it. And I know that what I'm reporting is very true for me. And so as we all collectively, uh, regurgitate our truths onto the table, to me, it's all these puzzle pieces, right? Um, I think that not to go, this is probably a whole nother episode, but I think that there is manipulation happening behind, like outside of our
Oh yeah.
purview. And so, there is a voice for the majority of us. So to your point, let's honor each other's perspectives, even though we don't necessarily agree to them, but know that we have much, much more in common with those people than we probably have not in common. And to be mindful of the more maleficent intentions that perhaps other people may have.
And I can even make it easier. So, like, I'm sure with your audience too, does everyone want to grow and expand and become a better version of themselves?
Yes.
Right? God's perspective is the sum of all perspectives. So, by disagreeing with somebody or shunning what it is they believe, you are constricting yourself and you will stay stuck. Like, to grow and expand and evolve your consciousness and become a deeper, more loving, wiser individual, you can actually do this through the exercise of just trying to accept and understand where people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and again, that will heal them and heal you because a lot of your beliefs are like, like if you have a perspective where you hate the left or hate the right, you have your reasons and beliefs why you do that. You have told yourself that these people are that way, that they don't know, that they're stupid, all this. So by gaining the understanding and acceptance will allow you to start melting a lot of that inside of you while you're melting it inside of them. And so, I'm a huge believer, like, don't talk about anybody else's viewpoint until you've spent an hour a day in their shoes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you did, you may not agree, but you will understand. And understanding and openness is such a huge part of expanding our own realities, our own lives, our own well-beings, and the collective as a whole.
So much of this comes back to feeling safe. And I think a lot of
Hmm.
people are raising the energy and the intensity because they're not feeling seen, they're not feeling safe, they're not feeling heard. We can all contribute to decompressing the tension by listening, by seeing, by understanding, not necessarily agreeing, not necessarily saying, okay, I'm on your team, necessarily, whatever, just hearing them and empathizing to go, I see how you came to those conclusions. That makes sense. Um, and we are different. We live in different paradigms, men and women, especially, you know?
Yeah.
So why
For
don't
any,
we,
go ahead.
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm ready to wrap it up.
I
But
was
for
going to say,
anybody looking to be better at this, Michael Sorensen wrote a great book. It's 2 hours on Audible called I Hear You. And it is specific. It is just everything you need to know about making somebody else feel more heard. So if you're interested in getting better at understanding another's perspective, this is a great book. It's all on how to. It's called I Hear You by Michael Sorensen. It is one of the best and easiest, simplest books on communication, making people feel validated, heard, and understood that I have found. It's brilliant, and I figure your audience would really get a kick out of it.
fantastic. And for those that want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can connect and work with you?
Yeah, so I will give you a booking link. If anybody wants to schedule a call, they are more than welcome to schedule a call, and I will give that to you to put there. But Tyson James Lee on Facebook, I can get you my socials. I'm on TikTok, Instagram. It is at the Action Boss on Instagram. My website is tysonjameslee.com. You can go there and book a free call. And again, I'm just happy to have a call with anybody, see where you're at, assess it. And if it is a fit, great. If it isn't a fit, that's fine too. But I just, doing what I do on a daily basis and getting to connect with these people just fills me up. There's nothing that excites me and inspires me more than helping somebody move a little bit further or closer to what it is that they want.
Love it, man. Well, thank you again for your insights, for your wisdom, and for sharing some of your stories. That was very powerful. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.